studies in Minnesota and has worked in politics at either the state or federal level for the last 8 years. He currently works for Senator Al Franken, leading outreach efforts on education, immigration, and Native American affairs, and previously spent 6 years at the Minnesota Senate as a legislative assistant for Senate Majority Leader Dean Johnson and Senator Rick Olson. The next person in the panel is Dr. Gilchrist. Dr. Gerald Gilchrist is a retired pediatric hematologist oncologist. He graduated from the University of Witwatersrand Medical School in Johannesburg.
Sorry, that shouldn't have gone in there, but Witwatersrand.
Witwatersrand, thank you. Medical School in Johannesburg. He completed pediatric residency in Johannesburg, London, and Cincinnati, and fellowship at Children's Hospital of LA and USC, where he was on faculty before relocating to Rochester, Minnesota in 1971. At Mayo, he directed the Comprehensive Hemophilia Treatment Center, was institutional PI for Children's Cancer Group, and was department chair for 12 years. His volunteer activities have included involvement with many professional and patient advocacy groups and societies, and more recently with Reach Out and Read Minnesota, tutoring inner-city first and third graders, and as a member of the Minnesota AAP Public Policy Committee.
And I'm Ryan Smith. I'm a third-year pediatric resident. I'm introducing Dr. Ann Edwards and Senator Scott Dibble. Ann Edwards is chair of pediatrics at Park Nicollet Health Services in Minneapolis, where she also practices general pediatrics in an urban immigrant community. She earned her medical degree, completed a pediatric residency, and was the chief resident at the University of Minnesota, where she continues to hold an adjunct faculty position. Previously, having served on the AAP's Vision of Pediatrics 2020 Task Force, she now serves as chair of the AAP's Committee on State Government Affairs and as liaison to the Committee on Federal Government Affairs and Subcommittee on Access. Dr. Edwards is past president of the Minnesota chapter of AAP and currently serves as the chapter's policy committee chair. Her areas of interest include health care redesign, quality measurement, culture effectiveness, and healthcare and advocacy education. And for anyone that's been involved in pediatric advocacy, she's the absolute source within the AAP for all that's happening in the community, and we much appreciate her participation in the panel. And my Senator Dibble, I can't do justice to his bio. His accomplishments kind of exceed what I'm able to say in a short period of time. But in addition to being my state senator, he first became involved in politics in the mid-1980s, working on issues concerning the civil rights of gay, lesbian, and bisexual, transgender communities, including HIV/AIDS. His involvement led to organizing on issues of social and economic justice, especially in the areas of neighborhood livability, transportation, housing, energy, and the environment. He's played a key role in a number of legislative successes. They include passage of a historic transportation funding measure, enactment of the Freedom to Breathe Act, and approval of the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act. As chair of the Senate's Transit Subdivision, Senator Dibble played a pivotal role in the override of Governor Palente's veto of the Vital Transportation Improvement Bill that will allow the Twin Cities to build a transit system for the 21st century. And again, all of the progress happening now, we can thank to, in part to Senator Dibble. And his bio is very extensive, and someone that's been a great advocate, not only for the numerous legislative issues, but in particular to a number of pediatric issues. And so we're very happy to have him here today. Yeah, so we'll open up with the first question here. And I think we'll at least starting out just going down the panel, and people can kind of go into freer form after this. So what are some of the common misperceptions about talking to legislatures?
I think one of the most common things that people get confused and worry about is that it's A, difficult, and B, just scary. And I can say, having worked at the state capitol for 6 years, that it's not. If you live, in the district, legislators want to hear from you. They want to hear what you have to say, what your thoughts are, and so they regularly meet with their constituents because it's their job. And so don't be afraid to go out and try to have those meetings. So that'd just be one of the things I'd offer.
I really can't tell you about any misperceptions because my legislators, of whom Senator Dibble is one, are very receptive, and I don't have to worry about what they're going to do and say, although they do ask questions, important questions. But from my point of view, they're close to perfection.
So I guess I would echo what's already been said, but the other big thing is when you walk into a meeting, I mean, these are people who have chosen to do this because they're really passionate about making a difference, and they want to get it right. I think that's one of the things that really your voice and trying to make the best decisions for the community, and to walk in with to a meeting with that mind frame, I think is helpful. The other thing is you don't have to know all the answers. Ryan described as me being the source, and I would say I may be the person that can find the source and find the answer, and that's okay. It's like we were taught in medical school. It's okay to say, I don't know, but I'm willing to find out, and I'd like to help you find out that answer so you can make the best decision possible. It's also a lot about building relationships. So this isn't something that you do in January, February, March, but in the off season, as I like to call it, this is a long-term relationship. Hopefully, if your senators and legislators are reelected, so it's about building relationships, not just a one-time deal.
It's been pretty well covered. There's a perception that legislators are rude or imperious or rushed or difficult, obstreperous. Usually not true. I can't speak for all 201 of my colleagues, but usually not true. The other misperception is that you're going to be shuffled off to a staffer. That's typically not the case with the state legislative office. Our offices, our districts aren't so big that we have to slough people off to staff to meet. We typically meet in person and want to meet in person. We're happy to meet in the Capitol at our office, but we're perfectly happy as well to meet back in our districts, and probably like that a little bit better, either in someone's living room or a local coffee shop in a comfortable setting like that. But the 2 points I wanted to really touch on are two sides of the same coin. Should I speak with my legislator if I know they're in full agreement with the position that I have? Or should I speak with my legislator if I know that they're absolutely 180 degrees opposed to my perspective? And the answer in both cases is absolutely yes. The short reason for that is because not speaking with your legislator, not communicating, is a form of communicating with them. It sends them the signal that they're on the right track, they're doing just fine. Silence is assent in our line of work, and so if we're not hearing from folks, we're under the assumption that we're kind of moving down the right path. And if you're in agreement, it's about developing the relationship. It's about educating. It's about upping that level of interest and intensity and feeling, prioritizing the issue that you care about by developing that line of communication and presenting yourself as a resource and someone with whom you can have an ongoing conversation. But if you know the person that you're going to go see who represents you has a completely different worldview and an opposite mindset, you absolutely need to spend some time with them. If for no other reason, to let them know that there is another perspective, maybe help change their perspective. Again, build that relationship, offer yourself as a resource. And in some cases, you can change a mind. In other cases, you can maybe blunt the level of opposition that they bring to the debate. And at a minimum, you can send the signal that there is a different view, a different perspective on the policy debate that they're facing.
All right, our next question is, what do you think residents can do to easily stay abreast of local and national advocacy efforts? And what is the best way to educate oneself about advocacy?
Well, I guess from Senator Franken's office, one thing that you can do is all of these congressional offices and most state legislators all do kind of email newsletters, updates. So that's a good way if you want to know what your legislators are working on. That's a good way to stay up to date on some of the things that they're up to. And then I'm sure our other panelists will talk a little bit more about the associations or organizations that you might want to be a part of to, stay active and involved. So I'll let others talk about that.
Well, there's a simple answer to this. The one organization that really has the information, and if you're interested in children and the issues related to children, get on to the email list for the AAP, and probably even more importantly, get on the mailing list that Anne runs, and I'll let her talk about it.
So, yes, I would say get involved. Just ask questions, send emails. We have a website, but we also have an email list, which is most active during the legislative session, and it goes out biweekly, which really looks at what's happening at the state capitol from the perspective of a child advocate, and tries to touch on all the topics that were discussed and what we're actively engaging in. And from that, what we really hope is to hear from you and say, yeah, you're on target, or did you hear about this, or how can I more actively engage? And so that's one way. We also have lots of opportunities to get involved. I chair the policy committee for the state chapter, and I love to have as many people there as possible, especially people who have energy and want to learn more. It's how I got engaged in doing all this, is someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, are you doing anything on Wednesday night? No. Okay, well, guess what? Why don't you come to this meeting? And that's really what started me being engaged. And the other thing, the federal office of the Academy of Pediatrics is phenomenal. The staffers there have tremendous knowledge, and there's an opportunity, as Jerry said, to be part of the Federal Action Alert Network, so you get regular updates, know when you can contact your federal staff and when you need to reach out about pediatric issues. These individuals are encyclopedic in knowledge, and same on my staff that I work with on the state government level. So if you have a hot topic, you can reach out to me. There are probably people that can delve into this because maybe it was dealt with in Connecticut last year, and we can really begin to address it this year. But the really simple answer is just read. I'm a big fan of reading whatever you get your hands on, and that's fine if it's a quick press, CNN, whatever, Politico. I think part of what we do is we live in a world, and you can become perhaps maybe have only one stream of knowledge, and I think there's a potential danger in that because you need to understand what's happening in the entire world, and so keep your mind open and understand the challenges and kind of what people are dialoguing about in the community. That's when you'll really get the pulse and be able to bring that back to your efforts.
All good stuff. There are other advocacy organizations that are great as well, Children's Defense Fund and others whose listservs you should, or whose websites are maybe something you should be checking out. And also the legislative websites themselves have fairly robust tools that you can use to track specific pieces of legislation or particular topic areas, et cetera, et cetera. So if you simply explore the Minnesota Senate and Minnesota House, as well as the combined legislative website, there are very, very strong information and communications offices that will let you sign up for specific things that you can track. Track bills, track the progress of the session itself, track issues, et cetera, and it'll proactively push those out to you on a regular basis. And just want to endorse what Ann said. be a consumer of all kinds of news, including news that comes from a different perspective from your own. And there are a lot of really great websites and services that will do little snapshot summaries of media. I'm on a listserv on several different topics, and I don't have to read the whole article. I can just read like the syllabus or the synopsis and then I can click through to read the full article from all kinds of media from around the country and around the world, and that's a big, big help to me.
Well, our next question is, what do you feel are the most important current legislative priorities for child health on the state level and on the national level?
From Senator Franken's office, our perspective, obviously the Affordable Care Act, or as some like to call it, Obamacare, will hopefully lead to some substantial benefits for kids. Senator Franken's spending a lot of time, a lot of efforts, especially around diabetes prevention. I think that's something that we will hear more and more of in the days ahead. I would also just add to the mix one thing just for folks to be aware of in the Senate. Senator Franken sits on the HELP committee, and the jurisdiction of that committee is really broad. It's health, education, labor, and pensions, and it's all in one committee. And so while there are certain health-specific bills and legislation that will be coming up or need to be dealt with, education touches on so much of the child agenda as well. And so, I would say one other thing to consider looking into or doing more on is in the area of early childhood, especially we know how that sets healthy trends for kids by getting them off to good habits and right at birth. You all know how influential those early years are, and so I think that'll be something to watch for also in the days ahead. So.
To me, everything in terms of child health depends primarily on access. There are lots and lots of other issues, and there are lots of windmills out there that one can go after. There are lots of really important targets as well. But I think access is my priority, and as Dan has alluded to, early childhood education can't be separated from children's health. And that is an equally important priority as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, as I sit here and listen to the answers, this could be. I don't want to make this seem like wow. There's so much work to do. Where do I even get started? I like to look at it as there's lots of opportunity to advocate. I often think of the UNICEF report on children, where the United States ranks last in children's health of industrialized nations, and that really looked at everything from housing to healthcare access to education. It's a comprehensive state of where our children are in the nation, and I think that motivates me to say, okay, what do we need to do and what can we do? And I agree with Jerry. Access is a big issue, and I think that one of the things on the federal level, there's this ACA discussion which really rolls out in the states. And as a child health advocate, the discussions that are occurring are very adult-centric. And the majority of our population is in the adult world. A lot of our expenses are on end-of-life care, and there are a lot of good reasons that that's happening. And I don't want to set that up as us against them. Money.
One reason
Well,
why end-of-life care should be a priority.
well, no. Good reason, but yeah. You're trying to, but part of the discussion is you need to be present. No one's going to think about children if we're not present. And we need to understand the dialogue, and we need to talk about children, and we need to talk about how that end-of-life discussion or diabetes care or take whatever chronic condition can be a lot different if we start to focus more on early life. Poverty is a huge issue, and if you look at researchers and early brain development and the adverse childhood events and stress and toxic stress, there's a lot of good data that we need to bring to legislators, that we need to start dialoguing with on the national level, but also on the local level. On the local level, access hot topics for us have been, yes, we have a growing rate of uninsured children, and we're trying to understand the underinsured with people who have high deductible health plans and what that means for our children. That's a huge issue. Immunization access. There's been changes in funding on the federal level that's really impacting access to care. I could go on and on. But it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to be part of it and then say, I know something, I take care of kids, and by the way, I'd like to give you the perspective of what it means from a child's perspective who doesn't vote. On a state level, I just can't not say that we also have a huge issue about health disparities in this state. This is significant. Minnesota is known to be this great healthcare state. We lead the nation, number 1 or 2. But if you're a child of color who lives in certain communities, your health is not good. And it is appalling, some of the statistics. And we need to take notice and really address that on a state level. I could go on, but I'll let you.
Well, the danger of my going last is I started making my list, and I just filled up the bottom of my sheet of paper here. First, let me just preface this by saying the presence of doctors in all of these debates is like the gold standard. And I've seen that happen in policy debate after policy debate. When the docs show up and start speaking out, that really moves an issue in a way that just doesn't happen previously. So there are a lot of folks who are doing tremendous work, laying the foundation, doing a lot of political work, doing the research, advancing the issue in the public eye, in the media, et cetera, et cetera. But when it comes time to actually get significant policy over the hump and passed, when the docs start showing up at the Capitol, start ringing their legislators back in the district, I've seen that kind of be the magic moment that kind of crystallizes because of the tremendous respect and regard for the profession, personal regard that legislators and the larger community hold for doctors. So please view your profession from that lens as an activist and an advocate as you go forward, not simply just a private practitioner provider that deals with people on a one-on-one basis. They have a huge role to play in the larger public discussion. I don't know. I mean, there's so much to say. There's so many, the hot topics around autism, diabetes, obesity, smoking, safety in products, safety in transportation, traffic, and that sort of thing. Access and, the dawning of the Affordable Care Act is going to be tremendous, and there's still a big political road to travel on that so that we see the Affordable Care Act actually be implemented and be able to really affect people's lives and young people's lives in a positive fashion. But I'm glad Ann touched on poverty. I think we absolutely cannot get away from the discussion about what's going on in our economy, the hollowing out of the middle class, income stratification, the effect on people's lives. And that's not just about altruism and caring about people falling into poverty. That's very much in everyone's self-interest to have a state and a country where folks really have genuine access to opportunity so that they can fulfill their own aspirations. The impact and the effect that has on overall health and the health of young people cannot be overstated. And the trends that are occurring in our country are shocking. And the effect that's having in terms of outcomes, general overall health and prosperity and the ability to prosper and thrive, is unacceptable. And you're going to play a key role in articulating that so that people really understand how that translates in real people's lives and in young people's lives. So I really, really encourage you to pay attention. What are the larger trends in our economy that are not allowing the middle class their foothold as they have in the past?
I have to interrupt with a commercial message. when we talk about doctors and professional organizations that they might represent, I think there is a real distinction. And my commercial message is that the American Academy of Pediatrics doesn't necessarily only represent pediatricians. They actually represent children. And that's very different. The American Academy of Physicians or Academy of Surgeons or what are there primarily to represent their constituents. And I think it's nice to hear that all doctors have credibility, but I think the Academy, by virtue of its advocacy on behalf of children in general, and sick children in particular, has a level of credibility at the national level and at the state level that I think goes beyond what many other organizations have. And there are lots and lots of opportunities to get onto that bandwagon and have established credibility sort of in your back pocket.
We could go on and on.
Which is great. And as Dr. Edwards was talking about, the Public Policy Committee is open actually to residents. So if it's something you're interested in, I really encourage you to. It's one meeting.
Our next meeting is next Wednesday. So.
But we don't know where.
Location to be determined. So.
Bumped out of her.
But, so at this time, since we've got about 10 to 20 minutes left, we'll kind of open it up to questions from the audience.
So I'm Warren Regelman. I'm actually a transplant from New York to here many years ago, and came here because the state did seem to be quite progressive in the last 30 years. I've begun to wonder about that, but that's another story. Ann, you said something that I've been bothered about too, and that's that we are representing children who are unrepresented, and they're disenfranchised. And I just would like to know what our colleagues in the legislature think about addressing that. Basically, our government's not accountable to these kids. Kids don't count. You guys don't have to get reelected based on the number of kids voting, and that's a problem. And that is very typical that poverty goes up, things are not addressed simply because they are not numerically represented. So what are our ideas about suffrage for kids? How do you guys see kids actually being numerically, effectively represented by their parents, guardians? Do we do a 2/3 rule, such as we did with slavery? What do we do?
I know you're not addressing the question to me, but I am going to put a plug in the fact when legislative priorities. This is the election year, right? I think everyone knows that. This is one of the things we'll be talking about at the policy meeting. This is an opportunity to remind people that you're voting for that you care about kids. You vote, but you care about kids, and to put some of these issues forward in those dialogues. So I'll let the others answer about what you do, but I think this is, again, we have to not dismiss that opportunity and really take advantage of it and remind people that there are people who are watching them based on how they're addressing children's health.
So I don't think we're going to ever pass the Phyllis Kahn bill that allows kids to vote starting at age 12. I just don't anticipate that actually happening. Yeah. Maybe if we give them a 2/3 citizen designation. Anyways, but Ann hit the nail right on the head. And I was going to make that point a little bit later. Elections matter. Simple as that. Elections matter. I probably don't need to say more than that. Showing up at the, part of how, if you're going to do the analysis of how you move a policy idea, it absolutely doesn't start when the legislative session starts. It starts with elections. It starts with the political cycle, the democratic dialogue. getting involved in politics is not unseemly or unpleasant or disdainful. It's absolutely part of our process. It's a democracy. This is how it works. So showing up, I talked about changing minds earlier, talking to those with whom you disagree, who represent you. There's an expression: if you can't change their mind, change their face. So, slot out the person who's just not going to come with you and slot in the person who will. No substitute for engagement. It's that simple. And then building a broad coalition around the issues that you care about. Early childhood is a classic case in point where no traction, and we're still a long ways off from getting where the vision is for early childhood education in the state of Minnesota, but we're a whole lot farther than we used to be, and a big piece of that is because the business community really dug in over many, many years, and we've made a lot of progress on early childhood. And they're part of a large coalition.
Scott, Senator Dibble, you kind of beat me too. I was going to talk about coalitions. I think one of the greatest opportunities you have is your natural pairing with all sorts of other organizations out there also doing work on behalf of kids. So, from elementary school principals associations to your PTAs to et cetera. There are tons of other organizations doing work on behalf of kids. And I know you all are often at the table already, but just to continue that, because it's such an opportunity based on the work that you're doing to build those natural partnerships. And to Scott's point about elections, absolutely. I mean, one of the hardest things, I'll just give you an example that always pops to mind when we talk about the impact of kids and their inability to vote. Oftentimes you'll look at school districts and their referendums and how levies fail. And you think about how many families in a city actually have kids who go to the schools. And it's usually around 10 to 20% tops. And so that's where it takes folks like you. Adults have to be there, that they're kids advocates, even if they don't have a kid in the school, for example. So just to reiterate, to beat you over the head with it, elections matter at both the national level and at the, who you put on the school board, all levels. So.
My grandson turns 3 next month, and I think it would be very appropriate to lower the voting age at least to 3. Well, I know some of his peers, so no, but seriously, I think we are an important surrogate community to be out there, and we can be very effective in getting parents involved, because they're the other important surrogate community.
The other thing is, if anyone has ever considered doing work in policy, we're always looking for people who might consider running for an office.
Hi, my name is Peter Scal. I'm a faculty member in general pediatrics. My question is about important issue coming up for debate and for a vote in November, and that's referred to as a marriage amendment in Minnesota. And I think about its impact on children. So I think that a lot of what's going on in our community may not directly be a children's issue, but I certainly think that this one is, and one that requires pediatricians to speak up in creating a society that's inclusive and giving the rights to everyone. And I'm wondering how a politically charged issue like this is addressed by the Academy of Pediatrics, and whether you guys have come out as a group in support of defeating this amendment, or how you guys play this out.
That's for me. So you've hit on part of our agenda for next Wednesday. This is it's a hot topic, obviously, and it's an important topic for the very reasons that you allude to. That this impacts children. Well, it's at face value, someone could say this isn't a children's issue. It is at the heart a children's issue. The process that goes through, and I can't sit up here and speak for the board, and that would not be appropriate for me, is we need people to come to the meeting that have opinions and want to provide background to the policy meeting. The policy committee will make a recommendation to the board about what our stance is and what our involvement is and what how we organize or not organize around that. So there's certainly ample literature around this issue in children that the National Academy has worked on. And the National Academy actually, maybe somewhat silently, has made a stand. The National Board recently signed on to some amicus briefs to really say this is a children's issue and we need to come out in support of looking at this from a children's issue. So they probably didn't put that on the front page of their pediatric news, but they did do it.
And a couple of years ago, the National Academy did come out with a policy statement which was based on research showing that the children of same-sex couples, their outcome health-wise and emotion-wise and so forth was equal to those of couples who weren't same-sex. So I think the Academy has produced evidence-based information which I think certainly can be used very, very effectively in this particular political arena.
This really gets to member engagement, though. We need to hear from members. So this is a hot enough topic that without hearing from you all that this is an important topic and you have a particular position on it, it may be more difficult for the board to move forward if they're not hearing from the members. We're a membership organization. We tend to listen, just like every kind of elected officials. If a lot of people are engaged around a topic, the board needs to address it, and so that's going to be really important. I'm trying not to show my hand here, but I'm going to really facilitate this, hopefully a robust discussion, so we come to the right decision for kids.
Well, I'll show my hand. I really, really hope that the Minnesota chapter comes out foursquare in opposition to this particular amendment, particularly because those who are promoting its passage are trying to frame this as a children's issue and trying to dress up what is really a fairly narrowly tailored religious perspective in the cloak of public policy and logic and reason. It's pretty easy to dismantle their arguments, if you have the proper setting and the forum to do so, and a lot of the fuel that we use, a lot of the data and arguments that we use come from the Academy of Pediatrics and other professional organizations. We don't have that available to us in most instances. We know that how folks make their decisions on elections, they make them based on what people whom they trust are saying and how they feel. It's, very, very important decisions about our future and in the form of elections and voting are informed by impressions and feelings. Sorry to say, it's true, but we know that. And how we feel, then we look for the evidence to support and justify and create a rationale for where we want to kind of go. When, like I said earlier, when docs step up as that respected voice, credible voice to say, what's good for children are strong families, period. This constitutional amendment does not accomplish that. In fact, it accomplishes quite the opposite. I think it'll be a big boon to defeating the amendment, which is very, very important to do, because it's very alienating to a lot of citizens in this state.
We've either overwhelmed you or put you to sleep.
So one more question to wrap up then. We've talked a lot about getting engaged with the political process. There was some mention about getting engaged with like PTA boards. Anything else that people can do to get really engaged in pediatric advocacy in their local community apart from going to talk to the representatives?
Well, this is a year that occurs only once every 2 years, or really once every 4 years if you talk about the federal races. So going back to my theme that elections matter. To the extent that your professional organization is doing report cards or questionnaires or forums with those who are seeking your support, please pay attention and participate in those. Wherever you live, typically the candidates are on the doors or having town hall forums or some sort of setting where you can show up and ask key questions. And you can do that in a public way so that you're kind of expanding the conversation, the awareness around the set of issues that you care about. Letters to the editor, just creating kind of a sense that something's shaping up around a set of issues that you care about, kind of the surround 'em philosophy. And candidates, I like to say, are like toddlers. They're absorbing information. What are people thinking? What do they care about? Where do I need to be on this stuff? And so they're, the time to really influence what candidates are thinking and saying and what they're saying they're going to do is right now. So engage. And then, just take a little bit of time, maybe do a little research on the individual candidates. Look at their websites, call them up, ask them for coffee, gather a group of 5 or 6 of you for coffee. They'll be there. I promise you they'll come to that meeting, especially if it's not around door knocking time. To engage with you, so a morning coffee or something like that when they're not out on the doors. And if you like what you see, spend some time with them helping their efforts. Get out and door knock, write them a check, have a little house party, raise a couple $100 for them. Then you have started to lay an essential foundation groundwork for that ongoing relationship that you can engage when it's time to actually start drafting and putting policy through the legislative process come next January.
So I like this question because it always reminds me to remind people that the federal level, the state level, even to some degree the city level gets a lot of attention with advocacy. And really advocacy starts on an individual level and where your interests and passions are. I mean, there are so many opportunities for you to advocate. I have a very difficult time disassociating pediatrics from advocacy. If you're into sports, reach out to your local sports high school team or junior high team and see, do you coach? Can you be the medical doc? There are all sorts of opportunities to advocate for physical activity and teach kids about, maybe it isn't the best thing that we have ice cream sandwiches after we sit around on a baseball field. Maybe there's some other healthier snacks we can have. That's a form of advocacy. My last patient yesterday, I looked at the mom. She has awful teeth. For lack of a better word, she hates the dentist. She said, I hate the dentist. I don't want to go. She's also a smoker. I look at the child and I think, boy, these are 2 huge risk factors. I can really start to work with this family on an individual level and advocate and say, how can we get you to a dentist? How can we do these sorts of things? How can I maybe think about working with my local community and getting that Ronald McDonald van back in my parking lot so the dentist can come to mom and the kid and we can make a difference? That's how advocacy starts. You don't have to engage in the Affordable Care Act if that's not your passion. Just look at what you like to do, and there's going to be tons of opportunity to do it, and you can do it on your time, easy ways, and what makes a difference to you.
Well said. I think there are innumerable opportunities, and you can find them in your professional life, and you can find them in your neighborhood and in your community life. One place that really gives you an opportunity to get information about advocacy groups and so forth at the state or the national level is to go to the exhibits at state and national meetings. Now, I'm not big on the exhibit issue and particularly the fact that as to who underwrites them, but the one fact is that this is an opportunity where a lot of child advocate organizations have a little booth. They don't give anything away, maybe as M&Ms now and then. But
I don't know where you're going. I don't do the M&Ms.
No, M&Ms are things that attract me to booths.
I'll note that.
Yeah. So that's a place to look out. You can look in the Star Tribune, and every day they have a little column with volunteer opportunities. I mean, you find a cause that's one that you're particularly interested in and are willing to commit to. That's one way to start out. No shortage, no excuses.
I'll give you a couple of local things going on that I think I'll put a plug in for that are good ways that you could easily, directly be an advocate for your patients and for children. One, I'm hoping there are many in the room who participate and reach out and read. Those who don't, look it up and get involved. It is a great, great program for working, with you all, identifying the kids early on, getting the books in their hands, and making those assessments that you all are professional and able to do, and we need that. As someone who works on education policy, special education is one of the most expensive areas in this country on education, and the earlier we can get kids identified and meet their needs quicker, A, we most importantly help the kids, and B, oh, by the way, we save money down the line. So reach out and read. I'll put a plug for that. Also, a local thing to if you have not visited it, I would encourage you to. I'd encourage you to recommend others to visit. The Science Museum has a terrific exhibit called The Wonder Years. It is all about childhood brain development and the science behind that and how critical that is. So if you get a chance, I mean, we have one of the best science museums in the country, and so is a direct tie to kids and the work that you're doing. The exhibit is called The Wonder Years. I'd encourage you to check that out and recommend others to view it as well. And finally, I'll put in a plug as a staffer. Don't be afraid to reach out to staffers in federal offices, in city offices, state offices. They are kind of the eyes and ears for elected officials and at times, and so they can be helpful that way. And I'll just very quickly share a story. They can work the other way too. I had a great example of a lobbyist when I was at the state capitol came and was very mean and very kind of just nasty to me as a staff person, and then went in to meet with my senator, and of course he was very friendly and very polite and very nice then. And I just walked away and I thought, we talk to each other, right? So there's my little plug for that. Be nice to staffers. So.
Since we're getting to wrap up concluding comments, so I want to endorse what Dan said. I was a former staffer, so my early comments, were really about state-level elected officials. And if you do have to have a meeting with the staffer, it's not the end of the world. But do be nice to your staff because they're our people. Then we rely so heavily, and they typically are we're extremely close to our staff. So be good to staff. I just wanted to take the opportunity because I didn't earlier, and I meant to say thank you for the role that you're playing on the governor's anti-bullying task force. Tom Scott is one of the governor's appointees, and he's doing a tremendous job. Tremendous job, really making sure that that report is going to reflect all of the points that it needs to reflect, so that a really, really strong recommendation for policy change and initiative at the executive level and the local level really comes forward. So thank you for sending Tom Scott to the task force, and I commend the organization for its really able representation there. Pay attention to the report. It's going to be issued sometime in August. We're polishing it up over the next couple of weeks. And then we're going to have a lot of work to get some significant policy passed. It's going to be hard because we've tried and failed over the course of a number of years, although we're poised and ready to go to get some good work combating bullying in our schools done. Amazingly, we have one of the absolutely weakest laws and policy approaches to that issue in our schools of any state in the country. So we've got a tall hill to climb. Interestingly, significant political opposition. It confounds me, but it's there. This organization is going to play a big role in making sure we get good stuff passed for kids in our schools.
So please all join me in thanking Mr. Solomon, Dr. Gilchrist, Dr. Edwards, and Senator Dibble for taking part in this panel.